overview. So far we have seen the first 4 chapters of the Canto 3 in the section 1, and then we began the section 2 of Canto 5, which mainly discusses creation, that is primary as well as secondary creations, which will be discussed in chapters 5 to 11, which is creation, and 12 will be secondary creation. So we began with the 5th chapter last week we saw, and today we will be seeing 6th chapter. Before that, I'll just give a 2-minute uh, overview for the first 4 chapters also. So we saw how Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2, it ended with the questions by the sages asking, we want to hear about Vidura and Maitreya's conversation instead of Padmakalpa. And Shukadeva Goswami, Sutta Goswami said, yes, I will be quoting what Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj actually discussed in regards to Vidura and Maitreya conversation. So in the Canto 3, Shukadeva Goswami began speaking about the incidents or the events that led to Vidura leaving home and going to forest and eventually meeting Maitreya Rishi. So before meeting Maitreya, he actually met Uddhava and discussed about Krishna's disappearance in specific and about Krishna in general. And then for more questions that he asked, Uddhava said, please go and meet Maitreya Muni. He also knows the answers for those questions. So then Vidura leaves to meet Maitreya, and once he meets Maitreya in the chapter 5, he discusses about or he inquires about questions related to creation of the universe. So that's what last week we saw. So last week Vidura asked about the creation, and then Maitreya Muni started explaining the primary creation, which is called as Sarga. So the primary creation involves how Mahavishnu, Karanodakshaya Vishnu, he glances at the Pradhan and it turns into Mahatattva. Then Mahatattva becomes, when he glances, there is time, living entities, all of them are infused into the material nature. So because of the time, the modes become active. In the Pradhan, the modes are in an equilibrium state. So when the time factor gets active, then the modes also became active. So then in the mode of goodness, the material nature is called as Mahat Tattva. And then the mode of passion, the material nature is called as Sutra Tattva. And in the mode of ignorance, the material nature is called as Ahankar. So from that material nature, which is in the state of ignorance called Ahankar, comes the rest of the material creation. So the primary creation means elemental creation, means all the various elements that are required for the creation of the universe are created, like the various like gross senses or the gross elements like earth, water, air, fire, ether, or the demigod principles that represent those particular elements, and the intelligence and the prana and mind. So all these kind of major elements which make up the universe, the bodies of the living entities, all of them are created. And after that, they were all like unable to come together. They were all created individually, but they could not come together and create the universe and serve Krishna in that way. So they all took up forms. The demigods actually took up forms by the will of the Supreme Lord and started praying to Mahavishnu. So last week we saw how the various elements, the demigods representing those elements, or the elements itself took the form. So they actually pray to Mahavishnu. So now we see after that prayers, after they prayed, what happened? What did Mahavishnu do after hearing those prayers? That's what we are going to see in this week in chapter 6. So the response of Mahavishnu to the prayers of the demigods, elemental demigods. So I hope everybody is so far like with me. Is there anything that I need to clarify at this point of time in regards to chapter 5? You can ask. Otherwise, I'm happy to begin with chapter 6. Okay, so we will go into chapter 6 entitled creation of universal form. So what are we going to see in this chapter? So we saw just now heard that the demigods prayed to Mahavishnu so that they all can come together and do something. So the 23 elements, namely the Mahatattva, Ahankar, the 5 Tanmatras, that means the subtle sense organs, 5 gross elements, 10 senses, and the mind. Totally, there were 23 elements that was created in the primary creation. So they all actually came together. The controlling deities of all these elements offered prayers to Karanodakshay Vishnu or Mahavishnu. So in this chapter, Maitreya describes how Karanodakshay Vishnu responds to those prayers by entering into the universe as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So this whole chapter is what happens when Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters the universe. So it's as simple as that. So in the last chapter, the elements were created. So now Mahavishnu is going to expand himself as Garbhodakshay Vishnu and enter into the universe. That is the main thing in this chapter. And what happens when Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters into the universe? So this chapter has in total 40 verses. So the first 10 verses speak about the development of the universal form. That once when Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters, then the manifestation of the universal form happens. But how does that manifestation exactly happen? That is explained from verses 11 to 26. And after the universal form itself manifests, what are the things that manifest from the universal form? So that also we will see. And then the feeling of Maitreya Muni in regards to speaking as well as trying to understand this subject matter of universal creation in general and entrance of Garbhodakshay Vishnu into the universe and the creation of the Virat Rupa in specific. So we will also see how does Maitreya Muni feel or what is his attitude, what is his mind frame when he is trying to speak or understand these universal form. Ideally, it would be nice to even hear those verses before we actually attempt to hear this section. I didn't think like that. I just reformat the chapter when I made the presentation. So now it's just coming to my mind. It would be even worth to see those verses first so that we get a mind frame to go into this chapter. I'll note down in the future if something like this is there, I can reframe the chapter. Generally, I don't want to do like that, but it would be helpful to hear his mood before we actually start the chapter. Basically, he expresses humility. How can I understand something which is a small living entity, infinitesimal, can understand the infinite supreme Lord? I am trying my best, but I can say that I understand everything. But whatever I have heard from my spiritual masters and whatever I have understood from by hearing my spiritual masters, I'm trying to describe to you, O Vidura. That is the mood of my prayer. We will see that in detail later. So as I said, in this chapter, it's going to be mainly the topic of Garbhodakshay Vishnu entering into the universe and manifesting the universal form or Virat Rupa. So that's what Maitreya Muni is going to describe. So the first 10 verses, as we saw earlier, is in regards to the development of the universal form. That means the elements are all suspended in a suspended state, in an unmixed state. So now Mahavishnu has to enter into the universe in a way so that all these elements can come together and create a universe. And we'll see how does Mahavishnu accomplish that. So there are actually 10 verses. The 10 verses are in a kind of not exactly in a chronological order. The translations are not exactly in chronological order. In Canto 2, chapter 5, in verses 32 to 35, we actually saw the whole sequence in chronological order. But here in this chapter, it is a little bit like back and forth. So that's why I have presented it in the form of a flow chart instead of seeing the verses in the order, instead of seeing the actual order how it happens based on the commentaries. So the first thing that happens is Karnodakshay Vishnu listens to the elemental demigods' prayers. In response to those prayers, he sends forth his cohesive energy called as Vibrat Shakti. He sends forth the cohesive energy, and what does the cohesive energy do? It enters into the universe and combines all these elements, which was actually like individually created but not mixed together. So it just brought all of them together. So what is this energy? So this energy that Maitreya Rishi explains that, so this energy is Lord's personal energy. He is personally actually sending forth his energy, because without his will, nothing can happen. So he understands these elements cannot come together on their own, by their own effort. So he sends forth his own energy, that cohesive energy, his personal energy, which he sends forth to combine all the elements. And when all those elements combine, that's how golden universal egg forms. So that is called as Hiranya Garbha or Hiranmaya. So this particular golden egg or the universal fetus, you can say. So this contains all the living entities. Because if you remember, when Mahavishnu glanced at the Pradhan, so the Pradhan had was invested by through the glance multiple things like time, living entities, the karma of the living entities, and the swabhava of the living entities. All these things were invested into the Pradhan through the eyesight of Mahavishnu. The glance of Mahavishnu inserted the jiva into those universes. So whoever was residing in the were merged into the body of Karanodakshaya Vishnu. They were staying in the reservoir of his abdomen. So through his eye glance, he transported them into a particular universe. So so now the living entities were already there. So they take shelter along with the elements. They come together and form a golden egg like a fetus. And with all the living entities, this fetus resides for 1,000 celestial years on the Karna ocean. Because I remember explaining earlier also, all these elements came together, but it takes time. It takes time for them to come together and to a stage where the universe actually is inhabitable. For the like we start cooking, so we cut say if we want to make a curry, so then we need vegetables, we need something for making a sauce, we need different spices, we need oil or ghee. So we collect all those ingredients, we bring wash the vegetables, chop them like that, so everything is there. And then once we start cooking, so we need all of them is ready, but now somebody has to put them together. So that's what is the cohesive energy is doing. Cohesive energy is coming to cook all of them together. So once the cooking starts, it's not that immediately as soon as you throw things together, they're going to be ready. It takes time for certain things, different things to cook. Uh, at different times it takes, and after a while everything becomes ready. So similarly, when all these elements come together, they take 1,000 celestial years while floating on the Karna ocean to come to a stage where the universe is ready for inhabitation. So when it is ready, then Mahavishnu expands into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. He expands into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and he actually enters into this golden universal egg, which is now ready for occupation and gives it life. So that is why Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is considered the super soul of the universe in one sense, like the soul for the universe. Also, you can say the body is considered the the universal body is considered the body, and the jivas are considered like the living entities, and the super soul of the universe is actually Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. We all have super soul, that is Shirodakshaya Vishnu, but the universe's super soul is sometimes considered or figuratively called Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, because only when he enters, then even though the living entities are like living, they are chetana, they have consciousness, but they were in a merged state, they were in a slumber state. So only when Garbhodaksha Vishnu comes, life comes into the universe. Ratyatra Prabhu, would you like to ask something? Please unmute yourself, Prabhu, if you want to ask something. So all the living entities were enlivened as if awakening from sleep this time. So once that,
can you hear me, Prabhuji? I'm
yes,
sorry.
Prabhuji, now I'm able to hear you, Prabhu.
Okay,
Please
there was something. So, yeah, my question was, who is Mahavishnu? Is it Karodakya Vishnu or?
Okay. Mahavishnu is Karanadaksha Vishnu, one who is residing in the Karana ocean. From him, he exists even before the creation.
So he is not the soul, because from him many universes comes, no?
True.
So he is not the super soul, I mean, of the entire universe. It is
Because, like say, because the Garbhodaksha Vishnu is a specific form for each universe, so figuratively he is sometimes, to glorify him, he is called as the super soul of the universe.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. That's just a small doubt.
Prabhu, I had one question.
Yes, Vitesh, please.
Prabhu, so when you say Karanadaksha Vishnu expands into Garbhodaksha Vishnu and Garbhodaksha Vishnu enters into each of the universe, my question is, when you say each of these universe, these are all material universe, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when Garbhodaksha Vishnu enters into the material universe, but this Garbhodaksha Vishnu is entirely spiritual and above the modes of the material nature, right? All right. But at the time of dissolution of the entire cosmic manifestation, all these material universes, including Garbhodaksha Vishnu, goes back to Mahavishnu. So that's one thing. And second is, and Vaikuntha planets are completely different, right?
Yes.
Because those are spiritual and these are material universe, right? Okay. But at the time of dissolution, what happens to all these material universes, including Garbhodaksha Vishnu?
So if I understand your question, you're asking if Garbhodaksha Vishnu is spiritual and all these universes are material, and at the time of dissolution, what happens to the material universe and what happens to Garbhodaksha Vishnu?
That's my question, Prabhu, yes.
So the answer would be in the previous, I think it's in the previous canto that we also saw towards the end of the canto, like around 8th chapter, like that, when Parikshit Maharaj asked, if Vishnu is like spiritual and untouched by matter, how does he even enter into the material universe? How does he make sure he is untouched by matter? So in a sense, Shukadeva Goswami said, he enters but he is still aloof. He doesn't even touch the like Garbhodaksha Vishnu doesn't even touch the universe, in the sense he says he enters, he creates water from his own body and he lies down in that. So he kind of gave like a jovial answer in one sense. But by even because he is the Supreme Lord, he can enter matter and still be not touched by matter. How he is also living in each of our bodies. What to speak of the universe? He is even entering into the body of worms or ants or all kinds of every atom he is in there. So still he is the Supreme Lord, he is untouched. So specific to your question, what happens to Garbhodaksha Vishnu on the material universes when the what do you call when the
dissolution,
annihilation happens? Okay. So the same thing, everything all the universes go back, because it is matter. They all go back into Mahavishnu, because from Mahavishnu only even the Pradhan comes. So everybody goes into the belly of Mahavishnu. All the living entities are also stored in a slumber state, in a samadhi state, they merged state. They also enter into the belly of Mahavishnu. And Garbhodaksha Vishnu is an expansion of Mahavishnu. So the source of Garbhodaksha Vishnu is Mahavishnu. So he also goes back into Mahavishnu.
Understood, Prabhu. Thank you.
So now we are at a place where the universal egg is ready and it is floating, and Garbhodaksha Vishnu enters, and then the life comes into the universe. Now, after Garbhodaksha Vishnu, there is a lot of details in what happens. In this chapter, it is not given. In the earlier cantos also, it was described. So it's all described in different places. Garbhodaksha Vishnu enters and sees there is no place for him to stay, so he creates perspiration from his own body and fills. So that is why he is called as Narayana, one who is the water which is created from his body is Nara, and one who is lying on that water is called as Narayana, one who is lying down on the water. So that's why he is called as Narayana. And from his navel, so in the 8th chapter of second canto, from his navel comes uh, the lotus flower, the golden lotus flower. So similarly here also in that the details of that, what first he expands, the first expansion of Garbhodaksha Vishnu is considered Virat Purusha, the universal form, the subtle universal form. So this particular subtle universal form is more of like an intermediary connection between Garbhodaksha Vishnu and the actual material manifestation. Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Vishnu is like very royal. If you just see, you have something to do, you have a responsibility to execute. So if you are really like a owner of a big company, you have to achieve something. You just have to go and stand there. All of your employees will work. You just make your presence in. If you're like really a boss, you just walk into a working area. As soon as people see you, they just will do their work. They'll keep doing their work, but they will be more consciously doing their work. So he hasn't doesn't have to do anything. His people will do. Similarly, Mahavishnu is also like very, you can say in Hindi Bindas, or you could say he is like really the boss. So all that he has to do is look, lie down. Means what a kind of a casual way of creating the universe is. He just lies down. He is in his mystic slumber, which is spiritual, and then he just has to glance at. And when he has to do something in the universes, the demigods are praying, you have created all of us, but we can come together. So okay, don't worry. So he doesn't have to do anything. He just expands himself. He doesn't go there. He just expands himself. And Garbhodaksha Vishnu, being Vishnu, qualitatively equal, he just goes there and sees, okay. He also doesn't do anything. He just goes there. He again lies down. He is also doing the same thing. He just lies down. And instead of creating material manifestation and helping him, he just creates a subtle Virat Purusha. He says, oh, all of this, everything will manifest from here. He doesn't have to directly involve with the gross manifestation of matter. He just goes there, lies down, and from him comes a subtle universal form. And the gross manifestation manifests from this subtle universal form. So this we saw in the second canto also. So now this Virat Purusha, who is a subtle universal form, is appearing, who is the first avatar. It is also mentioned in the 8th verse of this section in the Canto 3, Chapter 6, 8th verse. If you see, this Virat Purusha is considered as the first avatar of the Garbhodaksha Vishnu and is the self of the unlimited living entities that all rest in him. So now, this Virat Purusha, he is now manifesting. So this Virat Purusha then divides himself by himself. So how is it? That's how he's the Supreme Lord and Supreme Lord. So he manifests by him. He divides himself by himself. Differentiates into 3 Shaktis. So he differentiates into Jiva Shakti because he is already having all the Jivas in him, because he is considered as the Hiranmaya, the fetus was also him. So the Jiva Shakti, and then there is Prana Shakti for those Jivas to become activated, and there is Atma Shakti, the Shakti for identification with this world in various ways. So these are the 3 Shaktis that come up from Virat Purusha first. So one is called Jiva Shakti, the other one is called Prana Shakti, and the other is called Atma Shakti. And this particular Virat Purusha, after manifesting these 3, actually these 3 manifest into 1, 3, and 10. So we will see what are those 1, 3, and 10. One is Jiva Shakti. Consciousness of the living entities is one. It is undivided. It is Chetana, it is consciousness, it is there. All the living entities have the same, it's all together. It's a collective consciousness, Jiva Shakti. Then Prana Shakti. The Prana Shakti has 10 types of air. So the 10 types of life airs are called as Prana. First one is called as Prana, which the function of Prana is the breathing, the one which is we are breathing through the nose, that is called as Prana Shakti. Apana, the function of the Apana Prana, Apana air is, which is actually helping in evacuating, which flows down through the like towards the direction of the rectum. So it helps in evacuation. And there is another prana which is called as other type of air which is called as samana, which adjusts the food in stomach. Let us say, for example, sounds as belching, all these things are considered as samana vayu. And there is udana vayu, which is uh, what we do through the throat. There is we sometimes we feel like kind of suffocation in the chest and all these things. That kind of air is the udana. And Vyana is the total air that circulates throughout the bodies. Throughout the body where the pranic activities that happen, that prana is Vyana. And Naga is the opening of the eyes, mouth, etc. All these particular organs opening and closing, that is responsible, that is facilitated by the Naga Vayu. And Krikara is which increases the appetite, and Kurma Vayu, which helps contraction, like you open but you have to contract. So that is Kurma Vayu. And Devadatta Vayu is helps the relaxation by opening the mouth wide, like yawning and all this relaxation basically in the body. For relaxation, this particular Vayu helps. And there is Dhananjaya, which helps, this Vayu helps in sustenance. So these 10 types of Vayu is mentioned in the purport by Srila Prabhupada. So these is the 10 differentiations of the Prana Shakti. So the Prana Shakti, the one Prana Shakti is divided into 10 life airs in the body of the living entity, which will enter the body of the living entity at a later stage. So they actually help in various functions. So now the Prana Shakti is divided into 10, and then the Atma Shakti. What is Atma Shakti? Atma Shakti is the energy which helps in self-identification, because the spiritual living entities are now going to be put into different material bodies. So these material bodies and the spirit are unconnected. One is spiritual and one is matter. So they don't have any inherent connection. The soul cannot be naturally identifying with the body. It's a foreign thing. Matter is something foreign for the spirit soul. So what will help the soul identify with the body? Because if it cannot identify, then the purpose, it cannot stay in the material body. So that is why Parikshit Maharaj asked the similar question in the Canto 2, chapter 8. He says the matter is like non-living and the spirit is conscious, and they both are categorically different. How does they both identify with each other, or the soul identifies with the matter? How do they even come together? How do they even exist together so closely? What is making it possible? So Shukadeva Goswami answered very beautifully. He gave the example of a dreamer, and he explained how this is possible because of the false ego. So the false ego is that which actually is helping the living entity to identify with the body. So similarly, here we see in this Atma Shakti, which is the Shakti for self-identification, helping the Jiva Shakti to identify with the body, which will be filled with Prana Shakti. So there is Jiva Shakti and there is the body which will be manifested, will be facilitated by the Prana Shakti, and the identification is manifested by the Atma Shakti. And that is facilitated by three Shaktis. So one is Adhyatma, Adhibhuta, and Adhideva. So the Adhibhuta is the gross sense organs and the sense objects that manifest. and the person can identify with those gross sense organs and sense objects. And the Adhyatma is the subtle senses that manifest in the body. And the Adhidhaiva is the sense devatas who control these subtle and gross elements. So, with the help of these three, the body is manifested and identification is also facilitated. Like the ego, with the help of the presiding demigod who's manifesting, who's like overseeing that particular aspect, and the Adibhutada. But you have an ego, but what do you identify with? So you have to develop a gross sense organ and a sense object to be attractive for that sense organ. You have a gross sense organ, but the subtle sense is also required. So all those things manifest and causes the identification of the living entity with its material body. So that is what is happening in the first 10 verses. So just to revise these 10 verses, because the demigods prayed in the last chapter that, oh, we are all created, but we can come together and render you some service. So Mahavishnu, Karanodakshaya Vishnu, sent his cohesive energy first into the universe. So the cohesive energy put together all the elements, and a fetus was created, a golden egg, which is called as Hiranmaya. And after 1,000 celestial years, it gets ready for inhabitation. Then Mahavishnu, seeing that the universe is ready for occupation, he expands as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and enters into the golden universal egg and gives life to it, and then manifests the subtle universal form. And the subtle universal form differentiates itself by itself into three Shaktis, which is Jiva Shakti, Prana Shakti, and Atma Shakti. Jiva Shakti is the consciousness of the individual living entities. Prana Shakti is the 10 types of life airs facilitating the bodily functions of the living entity. And the Atma Shakti is the power with which the living entity can identify with the body. Ratyatra Prabhu, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, Prabhuji. So I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
Prabhu,
so what is the qualitative difference? We know there is a difference because they have different Vishnus have different functions. Karodakya Vishnu, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakya Vishnu, and Kshirodakya Vishnu. They have different functions. So qualitatively, what is the difference, Prabhuji? Actually, is there anything we can distinguish, or it is all same as far as their energy, everything? If we approach one, let us say Kshirodakya Vishnu, is it so that we can understand every one of the Vishnus, or just out of?
if I understand your question, you are asking, there may be functional differences for these three Vishnus. What they do can be different, but you are asking, is there a qualitative difference among them?
Yes, Prabhuji, correct.
Okay. They only have a functional difference, Prabhu. Qualitatively, they are all Vishnu Tattvas. They are all, in one sense, same. For sure, they are same in quality. Just that difference is they have different functionalities to achieve in the universal creation and maintenance and destruction.
Okay, Prabhuji, thank you.
So now that the subtle universal form is created and it has differentiated into three Shaktis, now let's see what happens to that universal form. So now,
Prabhu,
yes, Gail, Mother Gail, please.
I have a million questions, but just backing up a little bit to when you said that the Jiva Shakti is like just one collective Shakti.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to understand then how is it that we are individuals?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the question is, because one of the Shaktis is Jiva Shaktis, and which is described as the collective consciousness of all the living entities. Since we are individual, how is it collective, you are asking?
Yes.
So the answer is, it is a conglomeration. It is like a collection. They are all individual, but they are currently put together because they don't have individual bodies. It's just a group of individual consciousness. It's not like merged into one consciousness or anything. It is just a collection of consciousness of the jiva.
Oh, okay. Just put all the conscious,
All the living entities, basically, all the souls.
Yeah, in one pot. In one pot.
They're not kept together because they don't have physical manifestation of their bodies.
Yeah. And also just one thing I just wanted to confirm, you know, you were saying before about the Vishnus that like Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, he enters into the egg of the universe, but remains untouched. But the same can be said for all of us individual jivas, right? We also enter, but remain untouched, isn't it?
Yes, true.
Okay, just want to confirm.
The only difference is we identify with the body, and as long as that identification is there, we suffer. So that is why it's possible to be liberated even while living in this body when that identification is there.
Okay, thank you.
So in this next section, we are going to see how the gross manifestation of the universe going to happen through this universal form. So what is the function of the universal form in manifesting the gross material universe? Because Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is not directly doing it, it's through the universal form. Athena, you would like to ask something?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
This was tangential to what Mother Gail had mentioned, but around the Jiva Shakti, I was just wondering, since in concept, the Jiva is part and parcel of the Lord, meaning we are actually part of the internal energy of the Lord. And I understand we know there's different, we have the internal energy, the external energy, and the marginal energy. And the marginal energy is the Jiva, which means that it can be covered. But conceptually, if we are part and parcel of the Lord, coming from the Lord, which is the internal energy, then it cannot be covered in one sense, because the internal energy can never be covered. So I know it's quite nuanced, but could you, I guess, explain that, how ultimately, if we are part and parcel of the Lord, which is his internal energy, how can his internal energy be covered?
So if I understand your question, you are saying that the living entities are part of the internal energy of the Lord.
Yes, as part and parcel of the Lord. And even if we say we're, yes, part and parcel, even the Shakti of the Lord.
Okay, my question to you would be, how do you define the marginal energy? Then what is the marginal energy of the Lord?
Yes, exactly. That's in one sense my question. The marginal energy is, I guess, the term, actually, I'm not sure, I guess it's coined by scripture, but just in concept, if the jiva is part and parcel of the Lord, which is say we're the energy of the Lord, and the Lord itself is internal energy, then thus cannot be covered. So how is the jiva covered and thus categorized as the marginal energy?
So you're saying, why is the jiva, even though coming from the Supreme Lord, is not considered as internal energy, but considered as marginal energy?
Yes.
Okay. Somehow I'm just not able to pull the reference from my head. But one thing I can say is, yes, the Lord, the Jiva is coming from the Supreme Lord. That is like Mamaivam Sho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Manashashtani Indriyani Prakristani Karshati. So that much is sure that the living entity is created from is coming from the Supreme Lord. So you're saying, where is the scriptural reference to call the living entity as marginal?
Yes, that I'm not as not well read much at all. So I assume this whole term, this concept, internal energy, marginal energy, external energy, of course, comes from scripture. But yes, my question is just from a conceptual perspective, if we are the Shakti of the Lord, come from the Lord, part and parcel, then we shouldn't hypothetically be able to be covered because it's the internal energy.
That
Prabhu,
is
can I
why,
say something?
yes, bro.
Prabhu, yeah, I think I'm making sense out of this question because Bhagavad Gita says that so there is one superior energy of the Lord, which is spiritual energy, which is, I believe that's called internal energy. And then there is this inferior energy, which is matter. And then we jivas are generally called as marginal energy because we are inferior to superior energy, but we are still superior to the matter. So that's the reason I have read this term that we are called marginal energy. And regarding covering, if I've read correctly, and what Mataji is trying to reference is, I think we are covered by the modes of, we are conditioned and covered by the modes. So that's the reason might be we are called as marginal energy. But yes, there is a concept which is superior, marginal, and inferior energy. And if we are coming from the Lord, which is a superior energy, why we are not superior energy, why we are marginal energy, and how can we become conditioned? I think that's the point, I believe.
I thank you, Ritesh, bro. I perfectly understand what you're saying, and I'm sure Athena is aware of this. But it would be more for me, like I would be more satisfied if I can just give a Sanskrit verse from either from Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam or from some Upanishads, which says, "Oh, the Lord has three energies, which is internal, external, and marginal." Somehow, I am not able to recollect the thing because I know that it is there in the Ishopanishad book, Kshetra Tatapara, but in my laptop, because I'm sharing the screen, I'm not able to go to the other screen. Athena, all I think is you are just asking for me a scriptural reference to call the living entities as marginal energy and not internal energy. Am I right?
Yes, that's one, and I think when you do, then that, I guess, just squash it. It's just, that's just a categorization. But yes, it essentially that will explain it, and hopefully just give some commentary around. I think that will just explain it, yes, and maybe help me understand when conceptually, when we think that we just come from the Lord, we have the similar consciousness, how that can be covered, because it is essentially God's consciousness, of how that can actually be covered, because it's actually part of the internal energy. Maybe that purport around that Sanskrit verse will also explain, or we just have to accept that the Lord has three categorizations, and we are inferior superior energy, which is marginal energy, which can be covered. But I think just by concept, if we think, wow, we are, the jiva is that spark, and it is of the same quality of consciousness as the Lord, then it should not, which is the internal potency, should not be covered. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
But Prabhu, my understanding is that there's a categorical difference between marginal and internal potency, even though we do come from, we're part of Krishna.
Yes.
You know, we're his separated energy, you know, so, and that we do come from him, but we are not of internal potency. We are of a separate category completely. Although we do share qualities, you know, just like a gold ring has the same qualities that are in a gold mine, but you cannot say that the two are the same.
I think that is my question of, if a gold ring is of same quality as a gold mine, maybe the shape is different and such, but the quality is still the same. So if you put heat to it, it should melt. It should, so hypothetically, it should be the same.
No,
so,
but no, because, you know, like a drop of water and an ocean, you know, qualitatively they're the same, but you cannot float a Titanic on a drop of water, even though qualitatively they're the same.
Mother Gail, I would have exactly said something similar to that regarding the ocean and talk. So, Mother Athena, I understand you are saying, like, you also to some extent accept that qualitatively we are same. So why you're asking if we are qualitatively same, then why are we being overwhelmed by the inferior energy of the Lord?
yes.
So the idea is, by principle, means the living entities are actually a marginal energy. They are categorically different from the internal energy. I don't remember reading anywhere just because something comes from the Supreme Lord, it is considered internal energy. Then even the external energy should be internal energy by the logic. Even though everything comes from the Supreme Lord, there are categorical differences to each of those manifestations. So that is why the Vishnu Tattva is different, the Jiva Tattva is different, and then the energy, my external energy is also different. But I would be like super strong in making this point if I had a verse to pull out for you, which would exactly say, okay, there are three types of energies, like the Lord has internal energy, marginal energy, and the external energy, and the Jiva was formed the marginal energy. But this much I can quote from Bhagavad Gita, which says, Apareyam itastu anya prakritim vidhime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yayedam dharete jagat. So the translation goes like this. Besides these, that means the external energy, he just in the previous verse, he explained Bhumi, Rapo, how earth, water, fire, all these things are my separated energy. And now Krishna is saying, besides those separated energies, O mighty Arjuna, there's another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of the material inferior nature. And he says, all these inferior energies can get overwhelmed by the inferior energy. So let me just come back to you. I don't want to concoct, but this is a very basic concept. I will be able to give you a verse which says the Lord has three types of energies and the living entity belongs to the Tatastha Shakti, because it is a very common term. It is not made up by any acharyas. For sure, I can find your reference clearly and get back to it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a kind of a well known concept between devotees, but I understand sometimes for the very basic concepts we may not know the reference. So I'm sorry that I'm not able to remember anything, but I just don't want to make up or like kind of no, you have to accept this we have read so many times. I would rather give you a reference and speak on that authority.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sorry I took up so much of the presentation time. Thank you so
No,
much.
that's fine. It's good for me.
Prabhuji,
I'll also be clear. Yes, go.
I just have one analogy that maybe
Yes.
helps us understand, and maybe you can back it up with a verse maybe later. So I heard, I think in some lecture, like the rainwater, when it falls, it's pure, but when it actually touches the ground, it becomes muddy. So originally we may be having the Satchit Anand, but now we are, because we entered into this material world, we get diluted by this modes of material nature.
Thank you for that addition, Chintan Prabhu. As I said, like Madhuratina completely like gets this concept, but is all that for now she needs, in my opinion, is like a scriptural reference, like a verse which just kind of clarifies for her.
Prabhu, I
Yes.
got one question on this topic actually. That's my separate question. So
Yes.
question is internal energy, superior energy, and spiritual energy. My thinking was this is none other than Srimati Radharani. Is it correct, or my understanding is incorrect?
So you're asking the inferior, see the internal energy, which is spiritual and superior energy. Is that internal energy is just Radharani, or is there anything else? That's what is
Yes,
your
Prabhu.
question.
That was my question.
So Satchitananda, we always hear this term. So Krishna actually has unlimited number of energies also. So you can say Krishna only can have 3 energies, 4 energies. So it is basically when we say Krishna has 3 energies. So it's the classification we are trying to look at in a different way. So Krishna also has 3 other types of energies, which is called Sandhini, Samvit, and Hladini. Samvit potency is the knowledge potency, and Sandhini is actually the existential potency, and Hladini is the pleasure potency. Radharani is the expansion of this Hladini potency, pleasure potency. Sandhini is Balramji, existential potency. So in this way, Krishna has unlimited number of energies. How we saw here, he also has the Vibrat potency. The cohesive energy is also his potency. So when we say Krishna has 3 energies, It's just a way of looking at that classification for a particular purpose. So here when we say Satchitananda, Krishna himself, like personal manifestation, consists of three energies. But there could be unlimited number of energies that comes from Krishna.
Oh, I understood, Prabhu, now. Thank you.
So now we are back into this topic, a little bit of orientation for that. Okay, 7:55, we will do it as quickly as possible. So here we are going to see how the material gross manifestation of the universe is going to happen from the universal form, the subtle universal form. So here Maitreya Muni says, please hear from me how the Lord separated himself into the forms of the demigods. So here he is going to explain how in the subtle manifestation, a particular location will come. So in the second chapter, second canto, 10th chapter also we saw when the universal form desired to actually speak. So then the mouth manifests or something like that. So like that, different first desire of the universe, the Supreme Lord is the core of all the manifestation. He wants something to manifest. So that is the beginning. So then the physical place comes in his form. In the universal form, a mouth comes. And then the demigod is created who occupies the mouth of the universal form. And then the subtle sense organ that he controls, that particular demigod controls, also appears in the mouth of the universal form. And then the activity of the mouth, which is like the words. So that happens, that action of that organ manifests in the universal form. First it manifests in the universal form, and from there it will manifest in the living entity later. So all the prototype first manifest in the universal form, and then it will be reflected in the universe. So like this, so this is the this is what is happening in the gross manifestation of the universal form. First, the gross organ manifests in the Virat Rupa, which is the Adhibhuta principle. And then the demigod manifests along with the subtle sense organ, which is Adhidhaiva and Adhyatma. And then the activity of that particular sense organ, mouth, ear, eyes, that also manifests, which is also considered Adhibhuta. So this is how the gross manifestation happens from the subtle universal form. So the whole verses from 11 to 26 list a lot of this progression. So I'm just giving a small table. There are some more which I left out. So we saw already mouth. First, the gross organ mouth manifests, and then the controlling demigod Agni is created and takes its residence in the mouth of the gross universal form. And then the voice or vacha, which is the subtle sense organ, and then the words that manifest externally. So all these things come like this: palate, which is related to tongue and the taste, nostrils, eyes, ears, intelligence, legs, hands, material ego, consciousness. All of these individual elements manifest in the universal form. And from there, all these other aspects like the Adhidaiva, Adhyatma, and Adhibhuta, all of them manifest like demigod, the subtle sense of them, the sense object or the activity. They all manifest. So after this manifestation happens, then now the gross manifestation of the universe happens. So from this universal form also comes, from the head of the universal form comes the heavenly planets, or from the legs, it is said that the earthly planets manifest from the legs, and the abdomen, the sky region comes from the abdomen of the universal form. And not just the planets come, but the manifestation of the different varnas, the conceptual manifestation of the different varnas comes from the mouth, manifests the brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and the shudras. So all these aspects of these varnas, they are like so controversial in the modern world. But the original idea of these manifestation is because each living entity has certain inclinations. They have some desires to enjoy this world. So the varnashram is actually how, while living in this world, they can regulate their enjoyment and transform that enjoying tendency into a service attitude to Krishna and gradually purify themselves and go back. So that is the idea of this manifestation of these four varnas, because the living entities, they will have some desires But if they align with the principles given by Krishna and regulate their sense enjoyment and gradually give up their tendency for sense enjoyment, they will be able to achieve the Supreme Lord's lotus feet. That's the idea of manifesting these varnas. So in the 34th verse it is given, all the varnas along with their occupational duties are actually born from the Lord, because one can use actually these tendencies to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the Guru. When one does that, then he becomes gradually purified and becomes a liberated soul. So that is why this is also manifested from the Supreme Lord. And now, after explaining all of these, Maitreya Rishi is going to a very important aspect of the discussion. He says, how does he see this whole concept of Virat Rupa? How does he approach this concept of Virat Rupa in trying to understand this aspect of the Supreme Lord's creation? He says, who can estimate the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the Lord's internal potency? He's saying, how is it, means I'm trying to explain to you, O Vidura, how everything manifests, but still, how can anyone estimate the complete manifestation, the potency of the complete manifestation of the Supreme Lord? Because he is saying it's completely beyond my control to grasp the whole thing. But however, it just not just because I cannot 100% understand everything doesn't mean I don't need to endeavor to understand or to just say that how wonderful the Supreme Lord is by seeing all these things. At least that much I can actually come to a conclusion. So that's why he says this famous verse. Tathapi kirtayamyanga yathamati shrutam kirtim hare swam swatkartum giramanya vidasitam. So he says, even though I am like not able to completely grasp, in spite of my inability, I actually go on to glorify the Supreme Lord Hari with whatever I'm able to understand, whatever I've heard from my spiritual masters, and whatever my spiritual master may be explaining, but I need to have intelligence to understand what he is saying. So whatever my spiritual master has explained and whatever I have understood from that explanation with my intelligence, with that I try to glorify the Supreme Lord Hari. Otherwise, my power of speaking or grasping or intelligence cannot completely understand the Lord. But if I just keep quiet, oh, anyway, the Lord is unlimited. Let me not glorify him. Let me not speak about him because he is unlimited. That's what the impersonalists say. They have this concept of anirvachaniya. Anirvachaniya means, vachan means words. Anirvachaniya, that the Supreme Lord cannot be captured by my words. So why glorify him? Anyway, my words cannot capture the Supreme Lord, so don't glorify him. But but the devotees use the same argument, but they say, anyway, I cannot completely understand the Supreme Lord, but whatever I can understand, let me glorify. So that is why the devotees have a different attitude here, like Maitreya Muni is saying, whatever my understanding, with that I'll try to glorify the Supreme Lord, because if I won't engage my power of speaking in glorifying the Supreme Lord, it would remain unchaste. So that is why if we, then what will happen is, anyway we have to speak, we can control our speaking tendency. If we are not speaking about the Supreme Lord's glories or discussing about that, then we will end up speaking something mundane. We will engage that activity in something mundane, and that by that we become unchaste. We don't engage the power of speaking which is given by the Supreme Lord in his service. That's why we should not sometimes say, I'll only hear from very greatly advanced devotees. And I don't see anyone now, so I'm not going to hear from anyone. I'm not going to speak about the Supreme Lord. I'm not very advanced. So these two are an extremes that sometimes devotees tend to think. Oh, I'll only hear from very advanced devotees. Yes, we have to hear from advanced devotees, but there is nothing wrong in speaking amongst peers of in the devotional circles to try to understand whatever we have understood, to try to glorify the Supreme Lord. Our attitude should not be showing off our intelligence, nor should we think, oh, anyway I'm not pure, so I won't speak about the Supreme Lord. Whatever ability we have for pleasing the Supreme Lord, for trying to understand the Supreme Lord, so that we can actually gain spiritual knowledge or spiritual understanding and purification. So for that purpose, we can engage in glorifying the Supreme Lord. That's why Maitreya Muni is saying, Giram Anyavi Dasatim. Asatim means unchaste. Giram is words. If I won't engage in Kirtim Hare Swam Satkartam, if I won't engage in glorifying the Supreme Lord Hari, then my Giram, then my ability to speak will remain unchaste. Asati. It will engage in temporary material matters and cause me downfall. So he's basically is showing his humility, I would say. And then he says, what is the use of engaging that ability to speak in the glorification of the Supreme Lord? By engaging, what happens? Ekantalabham vachason pumsam sushlokamauler gunavadamahu shrutescha vivadvitvad virupakritayam katha sudhayam upasamprayogam. So the highest perfectional gain one can achieve by utilizing this power of speaking. That's what Maitreya Muni is explaining here. What is the power of speaking? Especially about the Supreme Lord. So glorifying the Supreme Lord is the highest perfectional gain of human speech. Ekanta labham vachasona pumsam. The living entities who have the power of speech, vachasa, the highest benefit, ekanta labham, the supreme benefit of that is Shushlokamauler Gunavadamahu. They have to glorify the Supreme Lord with that ability. And what happens? The Lord's activities are nicely put in writing by the learned, and the purpose of ear is served by hearing them, so near them, hearing them. So Katha Sudayam Upasamprayogam. So we actually connect with the Supreme Lord. Samprayogam means we actually make a connection with the Supreme Lord. Sorry, someone's thing is. So Ekantalabham Vachasona Pumsam Sushloka Maule. Then by glorifying the Supreme Lord, we actually gain the highest perfection by engaging in that activity of glorifying the Supreme Lord. And that is the purpose for the various scriptures. Why the scriptures are written? They are not written for us to just intellectually understand how things are working or just that is not the only aspect of scriptural writing. The Lord's activities are nicely put in writing by the learned, and the purpose of that is to speak the glories of the Supreme Lord. Ultimately, after understanding the universal form to whatever extent we can, even if we are not able to, ultimately we can say how wonderful is the Supreme Lord that He is manifesting all this. If in the heart, if we develop that attitude, really, not just saying, in the heart, if we feel gratitude for Krishna after hearing all His activities, that is the aim of, that is the highest perfectional gain of reading scriptures or writing scriptures or hearing scriptures. And this is what was emphasized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he met that Brahmana in Srirangam who was holding the book upside down. He was holding the book like upside down and he was trying to read, and everybody was making fun, but he was crying, shedding tears because of understanding the heart of the Supreme Lord. Oh, the Supreme Lord is so great, but he is becoming the charioteer of his devotee. How merciful the Lord is, how wonderful the Lord is, because he understood that in his heart. So the perfection of studying scriptures already was achieved by him. So that's why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased with him and said, you have already accomplished the purpose of studying and speaking. So here, and Maitreya Muni is saying, even Brahma, who is considered like the greatest intelligent being, the first created being, after 1,000 years of mature meditation, could only know that the glories of the Supreme Lord are inconceivable. He could not understand the Supreme Lord completely. Rather, he understood that the Supreme Lord is unlimited. That's the conclusion of his tapasya, of his knowledge. And if Brahma cannot understand the Supreme Lord completely, what to speak of anybody else? And Maitreya Muni is saying, what to speak of Brahma, even the Supreme Lord himself does not understand himself fully. So what to speak of the scholars in this world? The scholars in this world, they think they can juggle a lot and do some kind of a lot of interpretation and word jugglery. But the wonderful potency of the Lord bewilders those scholars, because even the self-sufficient Lord, who does not lack in anything, actually does not fully understand himself. So once someone asked His Holiness Radha Maharaj, the Supreme Lord is great. Why does he means? Can he actually create something, like create a stone which he cannot lift? So then Maharaj was answering based on this principle, how saying yes, Krishna can create something which he cannot lift, but the next moment he can increase his energy so that he can lift it. So both is possible by his energy. So he ever increasing the knowledge of the Supreme Lord, and the qualities of the Supreme Lord are unlimited, means his qualities keep increasing, and his knowledge also keeps increasing, and he understands those qualities. Then more qualities come, then knowledge increases. Like that, it's like an unlimited progression of qualities and knowledge, and that's why the Lord is considered unlimited. And he says, because the Lord is unlimited, all I can do is just fold my hands and offer respectful obeisance to the Supreme Lord. That's all I can do. So the world's mind, ego, and their respective demigods could not know the Supreme Lord. Therefore, we simply have to fold our hands and say, "Oh my dear Supreme Lord, with my feeble intelligence, I cannot completely understand you. You are for sure beyond the limits of my intelligence. That's why you are called as Adokshaja. So I offer my obeisances so that I can have the understanding that is required for me to come close to you." So in this prayerful attitude, if we can at least offer prayers to Krishna, we may not be always able to understand everything that is mentioned about things like universal creation, because we can be there, be like a personal witness, and words may have some meaning, but we may interpret it in some ways. So I would also personally offer this what do you call that, disclaimer, that I'm also trying to read from different books, commentaries, purports, but I'm just trying to present what I feel is the thing that I'm trying to read. But there could be more. So I'm also like trying to understanding this particular section gave me also so much more clarity. I don't need to be the I don't need to think that, oh, I really understand now, or I don't need to feel very morose when I don't understand. Rather, I should always make sure whether I understand to my ability or I'm not able to grasp anything at all. Ultimately, I need to develop this attitude that how great Krishna is, and praying to Krishna that let my heart understand the essence, which is the purpose of all this is to glorify Krishna and for his pleasure. So if I can get this essence into my heart and actually practice it, that I would consider as the essence of understanding all the knowledge. So thank you for giving this opportunity for me to speak. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So if you have any questions, we can take at this point.
I have a quick clarification.
Yes.
Sorry, I know you're pulling this from scripture, but I thought perhaps this is just someone had taken it and in one sense, I don't know, augment it, but another way to interpret it, but that the Brahmanas are the head, the Kshatriyas are the arms, and the Vaishyas are the stomach, and then the Shudras are the legs. And I know here you had mentioned it's actually mouth, arms, thighs, and legs. But is there, I guess, somewhere else that mentions head, arms, stomach, and legs?
I understand. Means both are mentioned, both could be possible at different manifestations of the universal form. Both are like mentioned, like in the, as you're saying, it is given in the first canto, in the second canto, various places. Different descriptions are given. It could be more like kind of a figurative in one sense. At the same time, both could be possible. In one manifestation, he can be manifest from the abdomen, the belly. The other manifestation, he can manifest them from the thighs. Both are possible.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was mentioning the different varnas. Is that what you're referring to? Yes, as well?
Yeah, you're saying that the different varnas in different descriptions seem to be coming from different parts of the universal form.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If there are no questions, we can. Yes, Mother Gail, you want to say something?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, just going back a little bit to our previous discussion. If both external and marginal energies, they both come from Krishna, but we don't say that like dull matter is part of Krishna, but we do say that jivas are part of Krishna. So is the reason why we make that distinction, even though everything comes from Krishna, is the reason why we make that distinction because jivas have consciousness just as Krishna has consciousness, or at least exhibits consciousness just as Krishna has consciousness? Is the presence of consciousness why we say that jivas come from Krishna, but we don't say that like dull matter is a part of Krishna? I don't know if I'm clear.
You are saying, if I understand your question, you are saying that because the living entities are conscious, we consider them as part of Krishna. However, the material energy is like inferior energy. That's why we don't consider that, even though it is coming from the Lord, as part of Krishna, part and parcel of Krishna, whatever. Is that the question you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Means ultimately it's all energies of Krishna.
Yeah.
So means means we have heard it very clearly from Srila Prabhupada in his purports that he is like the Lord of the three principal potencies like Chit Shakti, Maya Shakti, and Tatastha Shakti, and he has all these different kinds of potencies. But in regard to exactly your particular making this point, they both are energies of the Supreme Lord, but the living entity is considered superior and parts and parcels because they are conscious, spiritual. They are.
Yeah,
Does this make any sense?
Yeah, that seems to be the only difference to me.
Yeah.
Because everything comes from the Lord, but it's just because we share this particular quality of having consciousness. It seems that that's the only reason why, we are given this special like distinction of coming from Krishna or being part of Krishna, which I think is what led to Athena's question.
Yes.
I think it is a Vishnu Puran, actually, the reference, it is there in the Ishopanishad book also, which says that there is like three energies. But let me just kind of pull out Veda-based. If any of you like want to go proceed, you can go ahead and drop. I'm just trying to search from Ishopanishad if I can find that verse. Kshetra Yakya Tathapara. That's the only part of the words I remember. Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Kshetra Yakya Tathapara. Avidya Karma Samgyaya Tritiya Shakti Rishyate. Yes, I got it. So the internal potency of the Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual as verified by the Shastras. So this is also a verse from in the Madhya Lila also. So let me just open up the Madhya Lila verse and then quote it here. Just I got kind of the Purana verse that I was thinking of trying to remember. I got it from the database. So I'll just share my screen. So this particular verse on my screen is saying that Vishnu Shakti, the internal potency of the Supreme Lord Vishnu is spiritual. There is another spiritual potency known as Kshetragya, which is also Para, which is also spiritual. The third potency which is known as Nescience, makes the living entity godless and fills him with fruit of activity. Avidya Karma Samgyaya Tritiya Shakti Rishyate. So this is where there is a clear mention of Lord having three energies. One is the internal energy, which is also spiritual, the marginal energy, which is also spiritual, and the third energy, uh, which is like inferior. Does this kind of make some sense?
Kaushal Prabhu.
Yes, bro.
So in that verse which you quoted, Apariyamitastvanyam from the Bhagavad Gita 7.5,
Yes.
I was reading the purport, and in that one sentence, Prabhupada says, while exploiting the gross and subtle inferior energy, the superior energy forgets his real spiritual mind and intelligence. This forgetfulness is due to the influence of matter upon the living entity.
Covering. Because the matter also has in Bhagavatam, if you see, just expanding on that point, Balakrishna, thank you for that. The Maya potency also has multiple potencies, like the covering potency, you have heard this, and the throwing potency. So that is also another kind of potency where like the knowledge of the living entity gets covered by the external energy. Athena, it would be best for you to say, is this you're looking for? Like, is this verse is kind of the answer you're looking for?
I think reading the part, maybe the next verse, it describes how it happens. It's helpful. I think it's more the sorry not to break you up, but one of Gail and one of my and Gail's other teachers had just mentioned again that the jiva is the Shakti of the Lord. Kind of our philosophy is not, for example, hypothetically, that we are the children of God. We are literally the Shakti of the Lord. And in my mind, then really, if we're the Shakti of the Lord, the Shakti cannot be covered. And perhaps that this and the next verse may help explain it. I think it's just more of a conceptual. I understand it, and maybe I just have to say, I will accept it, that these are the three categories. This is what Shastra says, and because it's Shastra, then we accept it. I think it's just, without reading that, taking that concept, going, we are the same consciousness of Krishna, the Lord, and thus, how could it be covered? I understood that the avidya is also the energy of the Lord, and it is more powerful, I guess, in this little spark of this consciousness that is Krishna as well, and he wants us to be covered, or wants this quality, this little spark, can be covered by his external energy, and thus it'll happen. Maybe we just accept that. It was more of a conceptual question of that we're his energy. So how can it be covered? But maybe reading the next verse will help. Thank you so much.
Because this verse itself, Krishna is saying they get covered by the third potency. Because that is why they are not the internal energy, that is why they are called as marginal energy.
Yeah, but her thing is that, is his energy, so if it's his energy, then how could it be covered? She's not denying that it can be covered, but wondering how it could be. If Krishna himself cannot be covered, then how can that which comes from him be covered?
Exactly. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, means then you can go back and say also, like, means these are the kind of questions which are like, there can be so many other questions, like, okay, how can then God just come from nothing? Like, how it can be just like everything has a source, then what is the source of God? These kind of questions, I feel, is more of there you have to just accept the authority of the scriptures and the teachers and faith.
I think we said the answer before, Athena. I think we were saying that although everything comes from Krishna, there are different types.
Categories, yes.
There are different types, and so the different types of energies have different qualities, even though they all come from Krishna.